The wrench slipped from Danny Wright's grease-covered hand and clattered onto the concrete floor of his repair shop. He wiped his forehead with his sleeve and stared at the broken hovercart engine sitting on his workbench. 3 days he had been fighting with this piece of junk, and it still refused to cooperate. The twin suns of Dusthaven were starting to set beyond the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if Danny had the energy to appreciate them. He had moved to this frontier colony world 5 years ago, hoping to leave his past behind. The military had taken enough from him. Too many friends lost, too many people he couldn't save. Out here on the edge of civilized space, he fixed machines instead of watching people die. Machines were predictable. Machines didn't bleed. Danny was reaching for his toolbox when the ground shook. Not an earthquake, but something heavier. Something deliberate. He turned toward the open bay door just as a shadow fell across his entire workshop. The size of it blocked out both suns. A creature crashed into his yard with the force of a small meteor. Metal storage containers crumpled like paper. The security fence bent and snapped. Danny stumbled backward, his heart hammering against his ribs as he finally understood what he was seeing. A dragon, or at least that was the only word his brain could supply. The alien stood nearly 15 feet tall, covered in scales that shimmered blue-green even in the fading light. Massive wings folded against its back, one of them torn and bleeding. Its neck was long and serpentine, ending in a head full of teeth that could bite him in half without effort. The creature, a draconar, as Danny's shocked mind finally supplied the proper name, stumbled forward. She was female, he realized. Something about the shape of her face, the sound coming from her throat, and she was carrying something small and precious against her chest. Danny's hand moved to the plasma cutter on his belt. Not that it would do much good against something that size, but instinct demanded he at least try to defend himself. The draconar saw the movement and froze, her eyes huge and golden and filled with an emotion Danny recognized all too well, locked onto his face. Terror. Desperation. Grief. She took another step forward, moving slowly now. Carefully, she lowered herself to the ground, making herself smaller, less threatening. Then she opened her arms and showed Danny what she was carrying. A young draconar, maybe 5 years old by human standards, lay limp in her grasp. Its scales were pale, almost gray. Its breathing came in shallow, painful gasps. And attached to the side of its small head was a device that pulsed with a sickly green light. The mother made a sound, low and pleading. She didn't speak any human language, but she didn't need to. Danny had seen that look before. On the faces of soldiers holding their dying friends, on refugees clutching sick children, on anyone who had ever loved someone and watched them slip away. Okay, Danny said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. Okay, I see. The draconar pushed her child forward gently but urgently. Danny approached slowly, his earlier fear forgotten. Up close, the young one was even worse off than he thought. The device attached to its head was some kind of implant, but it was leaking. Fluid oozed from where it connected to flesh. The skin around it was discolored and swollen. Danny had seen enough jury-rigged tech to recognize a cheap piece of work. This was a translator implant, the kind that let different species understand each other. But this one was failing, and it was killing the child it was supposed to help. Why did you bring it here? Danny asked, then felt stupid. The mother couldn't understand him. But she watched his face, reading his confusion. She reached out with one massive claw and gently tapped the implant. Then she tapped Danny's hand. Then she made a gesture that encompassed his entire workshop. Understanding dawned slowly. She had been watching humans work, watching how they fixed things, how they combined mechanical knowledge with an understanding of living systems in ways her own people couldn't. Draconar were warriors and philosophers. They weren't engineers. You want me to remove it, Danny said. The mother's eyes brightened. She nodded, a gesture she must have learned from observing humans. I'm not a doctor. I'm not even a real mechanic, not for this kind of work. The mother's expression didn't change. She pushed her child closer. Danny ran his hand through his hair. This was insane. He repaired hovercarts and mining equipment. He had some combat medical training from his military days, sure, but that was for humans. This was an alien child with an unknown biology, and a piece of technology fused to its nervous system. The young draconar made a small sound, painful and weak. Its eyes opened slightly, unfocused and dimmed by suffering. It was maybe the size of a large dog, still small enough to be vulnerable, still young enough to have its whole life ahead of it. Danny thought about the soldiers he couldn't save, the friends he had lost, all the times he had been too slow, too unprepared, too human to make a difference. This time could be different. Or this time could be another failure added to the pile. The mother was watching him, waiting. She had flown here with torn wings, carrying her dying child, because she had seen something in humans that gave her hope. She had crossed whatever cultural boundaries her people held sacred, because hope mattered more than pride. Danny took a deep breath. "All right," he said. "Get her inside carefully. I'll need to scan the implant and figure out what we're dealing with." The mother understood his tone, if not his words. She lifted her child and followed Danny into the workshop. He cleared his main workbench with a sweep of his arm, sending tools clattering to the floor. The mother laid her child down gently, then positioned herself so she was touching the young one with her body. Danny grabbed his diagnostic scanner and powered it on. The device had been designed for machine work, but it could read energy signatures and metal composition. It would have to be enough. The scanner's screen lit up with data that made Danny's stomach sink. The implant had sent root-like tendrils deep into the child's brain. It was leaking heavy metals into the bloodstream, and based on the degradation rate, they had maybe 48 hours before the toxin reached the primary heart. Danny looked at the mother. Her golden eyes hadn't left her child's face. "I'll try," Danny said quietly. "I don't know if I can do this, but I'll try." Outside the sun's finished setting, the real work was about to begin. Danny stood in his workshop surrounded by tools that had never been meant for what he was about to attempt. His hands trembled slightly as he arranged surgical equipment next to welding lasers and industrial micromanipulators. Somewhere in this collection of hardware and improvised medicine, he had to find a way to save a dying alien child. The Draconar mother, whom Danny had started mentally calling Shira after hearing her make a repeated sound that seemed like a name, hadn't moved from her position. She kept one massive wing wrapped around her child, maintaining physical contact. Danny's scanner had revealed why. Young Draconar couldn't regulate their own body temperature. Without a parent's touch, the child would go into shock. Danny grabbed his communication device and punched in a frequency he hadn't used in months. After 3 rings, a tired voice answered. "This better be important." "Danny, I've got 40 chickens to feed." "Ruth, I need your help now." Ruth Okonkwo arrived 20 minutes later, her old truck kicking up dust as it skidded to a stop outside the workshop. She was 70 years old with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that had seen more alien biology than most xenobiologists half her age. She had retired to Dusthaven to run a small farm, claiming she was done with research. But Danny knew she still kept all her old equipment in her barn. Ruth froze in the doorway when she saw the Draconar. "Tell me you didn't call me here for what I think you called me here for. I need to remove a translator implant from a Draconar child. It's poisoning her system." "Are you completely out of your mind?" "Probably. Will you help me anyway?" Ruth stared at him for a long moment, then sighed and set down the medical bag she had brought. "Show me what we're dealing with." They spent the next hour scanning, analyzing, and arguing. The implant was worse than Danny had initially thought. It had integrated with the child's neural tissue in dozens of places. Simply cutting it out would cause brain damage, but leaving it in meant certain death. "We need to separate the biological integration from the mechanical components," Ruth said, studying the scan results. "Remove the device piece by piece while keeping the neural tissue intact. How do we do that without killing her?" "Very carefully." Ruth looked at Shira. "Can she understand that this will take hours? That her child will be in pain?" Danny made gestures, trying to convey the message. Shira watched his hands, then looked at her dying child. She made a low rumbling sound and nodded. They began at midnight. Danny used his welding laser at its finest setting, calibrated down to cut through metal without burning flesh. Ruth monitored the child's vital signs using equipment pulled from her veterinary practice. Shira hummed a constant melody, a Draconar lullaby that Danny's own translator implant picked up fragments of. Songs about flying through storms and finding home. The first tendril came free after 45 minutes of painstaking work. Danny's hands ached from holding them steady. Sweat ran down his back despite the cool night air. Ruth handed him tools and kept up a steady stream of conversation. telling him stories about her daughter back on Earth, about the time she had to perform surgery on a six-legged creature from Alpha Centauri, using nothing but farming equipment. "You're doing fine," Ruth said. "Keep that angle. Don't rush." The second tendril was wrapped around a major nerve cluster. Danny could see it on his monitor, a bundle of connections that probably controlled motor function. One slip and the child might never walk properly again. His hand shook. The laser wavered. "Danny." Ruth's voice was calm and firm. "Remember your breathing exercises. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, Danny breathed. His hand steadied. The laser found its mark. 3 hours in, they hit a complication. The implant had fused with tissue near the primary heart. The poisoning was worse here, the metal corroded and breaking down. Danny needed to clean the area before removing the device, but he had nothing designed for internal alien biology. "My med kit," Danny said. "The military one under my desk. There's a universal cleanser in there." Ruth found it and read the label. "This is designed for humans. It's designed for carbon-based life forms. That has to be close enough." "That's a hell of a guess. You have a better idea?" Ruth didn't. They used the cleanser. It worked. The child's vital signs actually improved slightly. By hour 7, Danny's vision was blurring. His back screamed from bending over the workbench. His hands felt like they belonged to someone else. But he kept going because stopping meant failure and failure meant death. "Almost there," Ruth said. "Just the primary anchor left." The primary anchor was the deepest connection, buried in tissue that Danny couldn't even identify. He magnified his view as far as his equipment would allow and began the final cut. The laser hummed. Metal separated from flesh one microscopic layer at a time. Shira's humming grew louder, more urgent. She could sense they were reaching the end. The last tendril came free. Danny lifted the implant away. This piece of cheap technology that had nearly killed a child for the sake of communication. He set it aside like the garbage it was. "Vital signs?" Danny asked. Ruth checked her monitors. "Stabilizing. Heart rate is improving. The poisoning should clear now that the source is removed." Danny slumped against the workbench. His legs barely held him up. Ruth put a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. Shira leaned down and touched her snout gently to her child's face. The young Draconar was unconscious but breathing easier now. The gray color was already fading from her scales. "We did it," Danny whispered. "You did it," Ruth corrected. "I just handed you tools. Couldn't have done it without you." They cleaned up in silence, both too exhausted for conversation. Dawn was breaking outside, painting the sky in shades of gold. Danny was washing blood and metal fragments from his hands when he heard the sound. Wings. Multiple wings, heavy and powerful and moving fast. He turned toward the bay door just as 3 massive shapes landed in his yard. 3 adult Draconar, each one as large as Shira, each one looking at his workshop with expressions that didn't need translation. They were angry. And they had come for answers. Ruth picked up her bag and pulled out an old shotgun she kept for predators. "Well," she said dryly, "this should be interesting." Danny was too tired to be afraid. He stepped forward to meet whatever came next. The 3 Draconar formed a wall of scales and muscle between Danny's workshop and the rising sun. The largest one, a massive creature with dark crimson scales and scars across his snout, stepped forward first. His eyes locked onto Shira, who had positioned herself protectively over her child. Danny had seen enough military standoffs to recognize the dynamics at play. The scarred one was a leader, used to being obeyed. The younger Draconar behind him, slightly smaller with bright copper scales, watched everything with sharp intelligence. The third was ancient, covered in ritual markings that suggested status beyond simple warrior rank. The scarred leader made a sound like grinding stones. Shira responded in kind, her voice defensive and desperate. They were arguing. That much was obvious even without translation. The leader gestured at Danny, then at the young one lying on the workbench. Ruth stood beside Danny, her shotgun held casually, but ready. "Any idea what they're saying?" "I think he's angry she brought her kid to a human. That would be my guess too." The argument grew more heated. Shira raised her wings, making herself larger, placing herself firmly between her child and the others. The copper-scaled Draconar moved to one side, trying to see around her. Shira shifted to block the view. Danny took a step forward. All 3 newcomers immediately focused on him. The scarred leader bared teeth that could tear through steel. "Easy," Danny said, raising his hands. "I'm not a threat. I helped the kid. She's alive because of what we did." The leader took a step toward Danny. The ground shook with his weight. Ruth raised the shotgun slightly, not aiming but making her position clear. The leader's eyes flicked to her, assessing the threat. Danny could see the calculation happening. Humans were small, weak, easily crushed. But humans also had weapons that didn't care about size. The Ancient One spoke, voice like wind through canyon walls. The leader stopped his advance. A discussion followed, this one less heated but more serious. Shira joined in, her voice pleading at times, defiant at others. Danny wished desperately that he understood what they were saying. His translator implant only worked if both parties had compatible technology. The Draconar didn't use implants. They considered cybernetic enhancement to be a weakness, Ruth. Danny said quietly, "If this goes bad, get to your truck. If this goes bad, we're both too slow to matter. Shut up and let me think." The ancient Draconar moved closer, ignoring the way Ruth tensed. It approached the workbench where the young one lay sleeping. Shira made a warning sound, but the elder raised a wing in what seemed like a calming gesture. It examined the child carefully, looking at the wound where the implant had been, studying the medical equipment Danny had used. The elder turned and spoke at length. The scarred leader listened, his expression shifting from anger to something more complex. Surprise, maybe, or grudging respect. The copper-scaled one finally spoke, voice lighter and younger. It addressed Shira directly. She responded, then pointed at Danny. She made a gesture that Danny had seen before, the one that meant clever or skilled in human body language. She touched her head where an implant would be, then mimicked the surgery, then pointed at her child, breathing steadily. Understanding seemed to dawn on the younger Draconar. It turned to look at Danny with new interest. The leader spoke again, voice lower now, less aggressive. He approached Danny slowly, deliberately. Danny held his ground despite every instinct screaming at him to back away. The Draconar was close enough now that Danny could feel the heat radiating from its body, could smell something like hot metal and desert sand. The leader placed one massive claw on the ground in front of Danny, then lowered his head. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, Danny realized. Not quite respect, but recognition. Ruth let out a breath she had been holding. "I think you just made an impression." The elder spoke again, and this time Shira translated as best she could. She pointed at Danny, then at herself, then traced a line between them. She repeated a sound that Danny's translator finally picked up fragments of: life debt, honor bond, family obligation. "I think she's telling them she owes you," Ruth said. "In their culture, that means something serious." The scarred leader made a sound that might have been agreement. But then he approached Danny again, close enough to be threatening, and made a series of gestures. He pointed at the sky, then at Danny's workshop, then made a spreading motion with his wings. "What's he saying?" Danny asked. Ruth frowned. "I think he's warning you. Word is going to spread about what you did. Others will come." The younger copper-scaled Draconar added something, voice urgent. It made gestures that suggested danger, conflict, enemies. "Great," Danny muttered. "I save one kid and suddenly I'm in the middle of something bigger." The Ancient One spoke one final time, voice carrying weight that transcended language. It looked at Danny, then at Shira, then at the sleeping child. It placed one wing over its heart, then extended it toward Danny. Then it turned and launched itself into the sky with surprising grace for something so old. The copper-scaled one followed, but not before giving Danny a look that seemed almost curious. The scarred leader remained a moment longer. He studied Danny with eyes that had seen countless battles, then made a sound that might have been approval or might have been warning. Then he too took to the air. Shira watched them go, then turned to Danny. She approached slowly, then did something unexpected. She lowered herself to his level and touched her snout gently to his shoulder. It was a gesture of gratitude, of trust, of something Danny didn't have words for. "You're welcome," Danny said softly. The young Draconar made a small sound from the workbench. Its eyes were open, bright and aware. It saw Danny and made a chirping noise that sounded almost happy. Ruth lowered her shotgun finally. "Well, that could have gone worse. What do we do now?" "Now? Now I suggest you get some sleep, because something tells me this is just the beginning." Danny looked at Shira, who had moved back to her child's side. Mother and daughter together, alive because a human had decided that species differences didn't matter when a child was dying. Ruth was right. This was just the beginning. Danny could feel it in his bones, the same way he had felt approaching storms during his military days. The question was whether he was ready for what came next. Based on the look Shira gave him, full of gratitude and determination, he didn't have much choice. They were in this together now, for better or worse. 3 weeks had changed everything about Danny's repair station. The broken hover cart still sat in the corner, forgotten and covered in dust. The welding equipment had been moved to make room for medical supplies Ruth had pulled from her barn. And in the yard, a young draconar was learning to fly again. Danny stood in the doorway of his workshop, drinking coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, watching Shira guide her daughter through basic flight exercises. The young one, whom Danny had started calling Pip after the chirping sound she made, was getting stronger every day. Her scales had regained their natural blue-green shimmer. Her wings no longer trembled with weakness. Shira had stayed despite her people expecting her to return. She had made it clear through gestures and the few human words she was learning that she considered herself responsible for Danny now. Some kind of cultural debt that went beyond simple gratitude. She helped around the workshop, her massive strength useful for moving heavy equipment that Danny could never manage alone. They had developed an odd friendship despite the language barrier. Shira would hum her draconar songs while Danny worked. He would explain what he was doing, even though she understood maybe 1 word in 10. It didn't matter. Understanding went deeper than language. The sound of an approaching vehicle pulled Danny from his thoughts. A transport was coming up the road, moving fast and desperate. He recognized that kind of driving. Someone with an emergency. The transport stopped in a cloud of dust. A centauri climbed out, a species Danny had only seen a few times. They looked almost human except for the feathers that covered their arms and the way their eyes reflected light like a cat's. This one was female, clutching something wrapped in cloth. "Please," she said in accented human speech. "I heard you help. My daughter, she is sick. The doctors say nothing can be done, but I heard you saved a draconar child." Danny unwrapped the cloth carefully. The centauri child inside was burning with fever, her breathing rapid and shallow. Danny scanned her with his diagnostic equipment. Some kind of infection, aggressive and resistant to standard antibiotics. "Bring her inside," Danny said. He treated the child using a combination of human medicine and techniques Ruth had taught him. The infection responded to a modified antibiotic that Ruth had to drive home to synthesize. By evening, the child's fever had broken. The centauri mother cried tears that looked like crystals. "Thank you. Thank you. I will tell everyone what you did." Danny realized his mistake the moment she said it. That's not necessary, but it was too late. The mother left, and Danny knew the word would spread faster now. He was right. 2 days later, a Vothian arrived with a child suffering from a genetic condition that caused breathing problems. Then Aquilix's family came, their young one injured in an accident. Then more centauri, more draconar. Even a few humans from distant settlements who had heard that Danny Wright could work miracles. He couldn't. He was just a mechanic who had gotten lucky once and couldn't bring himself to turn away dying. Children. Ruth organized a triage system in his yard. She numbered the cases by urgency, managed supplies, and occasionally reminded Danny to eat and sleep. Shira helped physically, moving equipment and standing guard. Pip would sit with the sick children, keeping them company with her chirps and gentle presence. One evening, after treating his 8th patient that day, Danny found himself sitting on the ground outside his workshop, head in his hands. The exhaustion was catching up to him. So were the memories he had tried to bury. Shira approached quietly despite her size. She lowered herself beside him and made a questioning sound. "I'm fine," Danny lied. Shira didn't believe him. She studied his face with those golden eyes that saw too much. Then she spoke in halting human words she had been practicing.
"You save?"
"Because you know loss." Danny looked at her surprised. "How do you know about that?" Shira touched her chest over her heart. Then she pointed at Danny's chest. Same pain. "You lose friends before. Soldiers." "Yeah," Danny whispered. "I lost my whole squad. I was the medic. I couldn't save them. You save now. This is strong, not weak." Danny felt something break open in his chest, a wound he had kept closed for years. "What if I fail again? What if I can't save the next one?" Shira was quiet for a moment. Then she said something in her own language. her translator not quite catching it all. But Danny understood the meaning. Trying and failing was better than never trying at all. Living with fear was harder than living with loss. A vehicle approached again, this time an expensive transport that didn't belong on a dusty frontier world. A human woman climbed out, dressed in corporate attire that looked ridiculous in the desert heat. Danny Wright? She extended her hand. I'm Dr. Ford from Biosync Corporation. I've been hearing impressive things about your work here. Danny shook her hand warily. What do you want? To offer you a position. We need someone with your innovative approach to cross-species medicine. The pay would be substantial. Full research facilities. Legal protection. Legal protection from what? Dr. Ford smiled. From charges of practicing medicine without proper certification. From the various species medical guilds who might take issue with your methods. From complications that could arise. That sounds like a threat. It's a reality check, Mr. Wright. What you're doing here is remarkable, but it's also unsanctioned. We can make it legitimate. Think about it. She left her contact information and drove away. Danny stared at the card in his hand, unease settling in his stomach. Ruth came out of the workshop. What did she want? To buy me or threaten me? I'm not sure which. Both, probably. Corporations don't like independents disrupting their systems. That night, things got worse. Ruth called Danny to her farm. Someone had sabotaged her equipment, destroyed her antibiotic synthesizer, and left a message sprayed on her barn wall. Stop helping them. 3 days later, the Centauri trader who had brought her daughter weeks ago returned. She was panicked, speaking too fast for Danny to follow. Slow down. What happened? My ship. Galactic Customs impounded it. False charges. They say I violated quarantine protocols, but I did nothing wrong. Others, too. Other families who came here. They are being stopped, questioned, accused. Danny felt the pieces clicking together. Someone was retaliating. Someone didn't want different species helping each other. Who would do this? The Centauri looked at him with fear in her eyes. People who profit from keeping us apart. People who sell us faulty medicine and broken implants. People who want us to stay in our separate boxes. Danny looked at Shira, who had been listening. Her expression was hard, dangerous. She understood enough to know that the conspiracy went deeper than one bad translator implant. They were in the middle of something bigger than a single sick child, and walking away was no longer an option. Governor Ivan Cross arrived at Danny's workshop with a squad of peacekeepers and a look on his face that suggested he would rather be anywhere else. Danny had met the governor once before, shortly after arriving on Dusthaven. Cross was practical, protective of his territory, and deeply suspicious of anything that might bring trouble to his colony. Tell me you're not starting an interspecies incident in my jurisdiction, Cross said without preamble. I'm treating sick kids. If that's an incident, then I guess I am. Cross looked around the workshop at the mixed equipment and the various alien families waiting for treatment. Pip was sitting with a young Vothine, showing the smaller child how to manipulate a puzzle toy with claws instead of fingers. The scene looked peaceful, almost domestic. Biosync Corporation filed a formal complaint. They claim you're practicing unlicensed xenomedicine and endangering patients with experimental procedures. The only thing I'm endangering is their profit margin. That's not a joke, right? They have legal authority from the Galactic Medical Council. They can shut you down. Then they can explain why they're selling implants that poison children. That made Cross pause. Explain. Danny showed him everything. The scans of Pip's failed implant. The testimony from other families about faulty medical devices. The pattern of customs harassment targeting anyone who sought help outside official channels. Ruth added her analysis, pointing out that the implant failures weren't random. They were designed to create dependence on corporate medical services. Cross studied the data for a long time. Finally, he spoke. This is bigger than a colony dispute. If you're right, this is a sector-wide conspiracy. I'm right. Prove it. I need more than one failed implant and some harassment reports. Before Danny could respond, the sound of engines filled the air. Multiple vehicles approached, and these weren't peaceful transports. Armed mercenaries poured out, wearing body armor marked with Biosync's corporate logo. Governor Cross, the lead mercenary called out. We have authorization to confiscate dangerous medical equipment and shut down this illegal operation. Cross stepped forward, his hand on his sidearm. By whose authority? Galactic Medical Council, signed by Biosync Corporation as the regional medical authority. This is my territory. I decide what's legal here. The mercenary smiled. Your authority ends where galactic law begins. Danny's heart sank. They had the legal high ground. Biosync had made sure of it. Then Shira stepped forward. Behind her, 3 more Draconar landed in the yard, including the scarred leader from before. The Centauri families moved to block the workshop entrance. The Vothian father picked up a piece of heavy equipment and held it like a weapon. You will have to go through us, Shira said in her halting human speech. The mercenary's smile faded. Stand down or we will use force. So will we, Ruth said, appearing with her shotgun and a dozen human farmers behind her. The standoff froze everyone. Mercenaries faced off against an impossible coalition of species, all united by the simple fact that Danny had helped their children. Cross looked between the 2 groups, calculating odds and outcomes. Then one of the mercenaries, younger than the others, made a mistake. He fired a warning shot. The plasma bolt went wide, but it was enough. The Draconar roared. The Centauri moved. The Vothian charged. The fight lasted less than a minute. The mercenaries had training and weapons. The aliens had desperation and the strength of protecting their families. One mercenary went down hard, tackled by a Vothian. Another found himself facing Shira's teeth. The smart ones retreated to their vehicles, but one mercenary stayed down, bleeding from a wound across his ribs. His own people left him behind in their rush to escape. Danny immediately moved to help him despite Ruth's protests. Are you insane? He just tried to shut you down. He's injured. I'm not going to let him die. Danny treated the mercenary's wound while the man stared at him in confusion. Why are you helping me? Because that's what I do. The mercenary was quiet while Danny worked. Finally he spoke. There's a facility on the orbital station. They manufacture the implants there. They're planning to expand the operation to 6 more frontier worlds. I have the access codes. Why are you telling me this? Because you just proved you're better than we are. The mercenary pulled out a data chip and pressed it into Danny's hand. The evidence is in there. Everything you need to prove the conspiracy. Cross took the chip and verified its contents. His expression darkened as he read. This is extensive. Manufacturing records, communication logs, financial transactions. Biosync isn't just selling faulty equipment. They're deliberately poisoning multiple species to create medical dependence. We need to get this to the galactic authorities, Ruth said. They'll bury it. Biosync has connections that go all the way to the council. Pip made a chirping sound and tugged on Danny's sleeve. The young Draconar had been watching everything, her sharp mind processing. She made a gesture, pointing at the data chip, then at herself, then at the sky. Shira understood her daughter's meaning immediately. She spoke in her own language, translated roughly by one of the other Draconar. The child says we do not need authorities. We have the truth and we have each other. Show everyone. Make them see. Danny looked at the assembled group. Humans, Draconar, Centauri, Vothian, Quilix. Different species, different cultures, all united by one simple principle. Their children deserved better. Cross, can you broadcast this data? From the orbital station, yes. But we'd need to take control of their communications. Array. Then we take control. You're talking about assaulting a corporate facility. I'm talking about exposing a conspiracy that's killing children across multiple worlds. Cross was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled grimly. I'll need to deputize you all for this. Can't have civilians breaking galactic law without proper authorization. You can do that. In an emergency? Absolutely. And this definitely qualifies. They began planning the operation. Shira and her fellow Draconar would provide aerial support. The humans would handle the technical aspects. The other species would help however they could. It was an impossible coalition, held together by shared purpose and desperation. As they worked, Danny received a message. Dr. Ford's face appeared on his screen, cold and angry. You've made a terrible mistake, right? We have your friend Ruth. Surrender yourself and come to the orbital station or she dies. The screen went black. Danny's blood ran cold. Shira put a hand on his shoulder. We go together. Save Ruth, stop them. Danny looked at the faces surrounding him. Different species united by one human mechanic's inability to turn away from suffering. Maybe that's what made humanity special. Not strength or intelligence, but the stubborn refusal to accept that some things were impossible. All right, Danny said. Let's end this. They launched for the orbital station within the hour. Danny stood in the main docking bay of the orbital station. hands raised in surrender while Dr. Ford watched from behind a wall of armed security. Ruth was beside Ford, hands bound, a bruise forming on her cheek. Danny's heart hammered against his ribs, but he kept his expression calm. "Smart choice," Ford said. "I was hoping you'd be reasonable. Let Ruth go. You have me. That's what you wanted. What I wanted was for you to stay in your place. Fix your little machines, leave medicine to the professionals. But you had to be a hero. I just helped some kids. You disrupted carefully balanced systems. You made people question authority. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is?" Ford stepped closer, her professional mask slipping. "Humans don't belong in alien affairs. We're too different. Every time we mix, we create dependencies and conflicts. I'm trying to protect humanity by keeping us separate. You're killing children to maintain control. I'm maintaining order in a chaotic galaxy." While they talked, Danny's mind raced through the plan. Shira and the other Draconar were approaching the station from multiple angles. Governor Cross was leading a team through the maintenance corridors. The other species were infiltrating through cargo bays. Danny just needed to keep Ford distracted long enough for everyone to get into position. "You really believe you're doing the right thing?" Danny asked. "I believe in human survival. Your little cross-species friendship experiment will get people killed. When the inevitable conflicts arise, the only conflict I see is you stopping families from helping each other." Ford's expression hardened. "Take him to detention, and make sure our guests in the medical bay stay comfortable. We'll need them as insurance." Guards moved to grab Danny, but before they could reach him, alarms blared throughout the station. Screens lit up with warnings about unauthorized access in multiple sections. Ford spun toward a control panel. "What's happening?" "Looks like my friends arrived," Danny said. The docking bay doors exploded inward. Shira crashed through, wings spread wide, roaring defiance. Behind her came the scarred Draconar leader, and half a dozen others. Guards scattered. Ford stumbled backward. In the chaos, Danny lunged for Ruth. "Go!" Danny shouted, cutting her bonds with a maintenance tool he had hidden in his boot. They ran as plasma fire lit up the bay. Shira provided cover, her armored scales deflecting shots that would have killed a human. The other Draconar spread through the station like avenging angels. Danny led Ruth through corridors he had memorized from station schematics Cross had provided. They needed to reach the communications array before Ford could lock it down. Behind them, sounds of fighting echoed through the metal halls. They reached a junction and nearly ran into Governor Cross and his team. The Centauri trader was with them, along with several Vothian and humans from the farming settlements. "Medical bay is secure," Cross reported. "We found a dozen alien children being held for experiments, testing new implant designs on them." Danny felt sick. "Are they okay?" "Scared but alive. Your Draconar friends are with them now." They pushed forward deck by deck, encountering resistance but overwhelming it through sheer numbers and determination. The station's crew hadn't expected a coordinated assault from multiple species. They were trained to handle typical threats, not parents fighting for their children. Danny's team reached the communications array. Ruth immediately set to work hacking into the system while Cross's people held the corridor. Danny accessed the data chip the mercenary had given him, preparing to broadcast everything. Then Pip appeared, having followed despite explicit instructions to stay safe. The young Draconar chirped urgently and pointed down a side corridor. "What's she trying to tell us?" Danny asked. Shira, who had caught up to them, listened to her daughter's explanation. She spoke in broken human words. "Pip says, production place, where they make bad implants. She can smell the metal. Can she lead us there?" Pip nodded enthusiastically and took off down the corridor. Danny followed with Shira beside him. They found the manufacturing facility hidden behind false storage designations. Rows of machines produced translator implants, medical devices, all with built-in failure points designed to poison their users over time. Pip approached the main production terminal with the curiosity only a child could maintain in such circumstances. She studied the interface, tilting her head. Danny's translator implant picked up her muttering. She was comparing what she saw to what she had learned watching Danny work. "Design is wrong," Pip said in halting human speech. "Like puzzle with wrong pieces." She reached out with one small claw and began manipulating the controls. Danny watched in amazement as the young Draconar, barely recovered from near-death herself, navigated the complex manufacturing programming. She had been paying attention all those weeks, watching Danny fix things, learning the logic of how systems fit together. Pip, what are you doing? Fixing, like you fix. Wrong pieces out, right pieces in. She worked for several minutes, her young mind seeing patterns that adults had missed. Then the machines hummed differently. The production template changed. Pip had corrected the design flaws that caused the implants to fail. She did it, Danny breathed. She fixed the manufacturing process. Shira made a sound of pure pride. Her daughter, her sick child who had nearly died, had just solved a problem that corporations had deliberately created. Guards burst into the room. Ford was with them, her composure completely gone. Stop them. But before anyone could move, every screen in the facility lit up with the same broadcast. Ruth had gotten the communications array working. The data from the chip was being transmitted across the sector. Every ship, every station, every colony was receiving the evidence of BioSync's conspiracy. Manufacturing records, financial transactions showing payments to suppress information, communications between executives discussing the planned expansion to more worlds, footage of the children being experimented on. And now, thanks to Pip, proof that the implants could be made safely but weren't because failure was more profitable than success. Ford stared at the screens, her face pale. You've destroyed everything. We exposed the truth, Danny said. There's a difference. The guards lowered their weapons. They weren't corporate soldiers. They were people who had families, people who had been lied to about what they were protecting. They weren't willing to fight for a conspiracy anymore. Over the next hour, galactic authorities arrived in force. Real authorities this time, not corporate puppets. Ford and her associates were arrested. The children in the medical bay were reunited with their families. The manufacturing facility was shut down for investigation. Danny stood in the docking bay, exhausted beyond measure, watching ships arrive to collect the evidence. Pip was perched on his shoulder, chirping happily. Shira stood beside him, one wing extended over both him and Ruth in a gesture of protection and affection. We did it, Ruth said quietly. We actually did it. Pip did it, Danny corrected. She's the one who fixed the production system. Governor Cross approached with news. Galactic Council is launching a full investigation. They're already finding similar conspiracies on 17 other worlds. You've started something big, right? I just wanted to help one sick kid. That's how change starts. One person deciding that helping matters more than following rules. 6 months passed. Danny's repair station had transformed into something new. He still fixed machines, but now he also ran a training facility where humans and aliens learned from each other. Medical techniques, engineering solutions, ways to bridge the gap between species through practical problem-solving rather than official channels. Ruth taught xenobiology to students from a dozen different worlds. Shira headed security and cultural liaison, making sure different species understood each other beyond simple translation. Pip, fully grown now and healthy, was training to become an engineer healer, combining her natural Draconar problem-solving with human practical innovation. They called the facility Pip's Hope, named after the young Draconar, who had proved that children could see solutions adults missed. The name spread across worlds, becoming shorthand for the kind of cooperation that ignored species boundaries in favor of shared purpose. Danny stood in what used to be his repair bay, now a classroom where a Vothine was teaching a human student about their species' approach to mechanical systems. A sentry was showing a young Draconar how their people navigated stellar currents. Knowledge flowed in all directions. A message arrived on Danny's terminal. A colony 3 systems away had a medical emergency. They were asking specifically for the team from Pip's Hope. A child was sick and the local authorities couldn't help. Shira appeared beside him, reading over his shoulder. She had learned enough human language now to communicate clearly. Will you go? Danny looked around the facility, at the humans and aliens working side by side, at Pip showing a group of children how to repair a complex circuit, at Ruth laughing with a Quilix scientist about some shared joke, at the future they had built from one desperate mother's decision to trust a human mechanic. We'll go, Danny said. Together, they gathered a team and prepared their ship. Humans, Draconar, Centauri, Vothine, Quilix all ready to help. They launched toward the stars, toward another family that needed them, toward another chance to prove that the incredible thing wasn't advanced technology or military might. The incredible thing was simple. When someone chose compassion over fear, when they helped despite the risks, when they saw past species differences to the universal truth that every parent loved their child the same way, that was when real change happened. One human mechanic had made that choice. One Draconar mother had trusted across species lines. One young child had learned that fixing what was broken mattered more than who had broken it. And from those simple choices, something incredible had emerged. Not a government or corporation or military force, but a community built on the revolutionary idea that helping each other was more important than maintaining divisions. The ship jumped to light speed, carrying its mixed crew toward the next emergency, the next family, the next chance to prove that the future belonged to those willing to build it together. Behind them, Pip's hope continued its work. Training the next generation, sharing knowledge, breaking down the walls that kept species apart. The facility would grow, spread to other worlds, inspire similar efforts, all because one human couldn't turn away from a dying child. And one alien mother believed that love transcended species. That was the incredible thing. And it was only the beginning.